Kawan. Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to do a little bit meditation. After the meditation, Dhamma Talk and question and answer. So right now, Venerable Chandasara is going to lead the meditation.
Now let us spread loving kindness thoughts to all the living beings. For that, first, it's better to relax our body and mind. For that, sit in a comfortable posture. It would be great if you have upright posture. Sit comfortably and gently. Breathe in and breathe out gently for a couple of minutes. Now let's switch to loving kindness meditation. In this way, we have to spread loving kindness thoughts to all the living beings. May all the living beings be physically well. May all the living beings be free from incoming disturbances. May all the living beings be mentally well. We continue loving kindness thoughts in this way until we hear the bell sound.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Chandasara, leading the Metta meditation. Right now, time for the Dhamma Talk. Reverend Kusala is going to talk today. Kusala, you can start your Dhamma Talk right now.
Okay. Well, welcome to everybody on this beautiful Sunday morning. Vincent and Selvin. Thanks for the email, Selvin. And there is Shraddha. Hey, Shraddha. And so I'm going to talk about the first path factor today, which is right view. And I've heard people talk about it before, and a lot of times I didn't necessarily agree with what they had to say. So this is what I have come to understand right view means in Buddhism and the Eightfold Path. So right view has two parts. Right view has the mundane and the supramundane. And I'm going to start with the mundane first, which is probably the most practical way of looking at it. Number one, right view is to know the difference between right and wrong, skillful and unskillful. And this can be problematic because right and wrong oftentimes is arbitrary and changes without notice. I'm reminded of the oil shortage back in the 70s and how we reduced the speed limit from 65 to 55 to conserve gasoline. It may be happening again. We don't know. Prices keep going up.
And with me, I drive slow.
So it was right to do that. And that was a good thing. And now we drive 65 and sometimes faster. And it's okay to do that. And that's a good thing as well. So right and wrong can change. But from a Buddhist perspective, we would say that right is when you are practicing generosity, kindness, and using wisdom to understand the situation you're in. We would consider wrong to be when it is filled with greed, hatred, and delusion. Let me put this. So the greed, hatred, and delusion, and 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So the greed, hatred, and delusion would be misunderstanding the situation you're in and doing it from a very selfish perspective. So we have right and we have wrong, we have good and we have bad, we have skillful and we have unskillful. And in this mix, we throw in karma. And the deal with karma is it takes the place of a divine lawgiver. So we don't have a divine lawgiver defining for us what is right and wrong, good and bad. What we have instead is cause and consequence. And we can pretty much get enough feedback to understand whether what we're doing is good or bad, right and wrong, by the amount of suffering we're experiencing. So the more suffering we're experiencing, that would indicate to us that we are being unskillful. The less suffering we would experience, that would indicate to us that we're being more skillful. And that's the road we want to take. So it all boils down to really suffering and non-suffering, happiness and sadness. It's a way we are perceiving the world around us and are experiencing in it. Okay, now in order to have it work effectively, we need to insert the concept of rebirth. And why is rebirth important in karma and right and wrong? Rebirth is important because that's where the consequences will arrive eventually. So all the karma that we have created in this life, all the intention, speech, and action, and their consequences will be transferred to the next life. And we will be the recipient of that. And we will either start in Palis Verdes or South Central. But as we go along in our next life and our next life and our next life, it's not fatalistic. Every moment we make a wise and conscious choice, we change the outcome of the karma, past karma and present karma. So it's really up to us to be conscious and sensitive to our life and the lives of others. Now, not everybody buys into rebirth, but the reason rebirth is such an important part is it's transferred from one life to the next. But also, if we didn't have rebirth, we may feel that there is no consequence. For instance, you're an atheist and you don't believe in anything, and when you die, you feed the plants. Okay, now there are some people in the world that feel that way, but what would keep them on course for having a good and skillful life if there's no consequence to what you do? So you might think to yourself, well, it doesn't matter what I do because I'll be dead one day and feeding the trees. So if I kill 100 people, I'm still going to be dead. And if I help 100 people, I'm still going to be dead. So what does it matter? So the Buddha had this very practical way of looking at what we do, what we say, and how we do it. And it allowed us to judge and critique our life as being skillful or unskillful, good or bad. And rebirth is a very important part of that. Now, if you're a Christian and they have their rebirth, it's only once, and either it's heaven or hell. And I'm, of course, oversimplifying this. So even they use the concept of, well, if you do good things, you'll have a reward at the end. And if you're unskillful and do bad things, you'll be punished at the end. So Buddhism has that too, but it's a little more, we have a little more control over it, I'll say. Okay, that's the first mundane part of right view. Good and bad, skillful and unskillful. The second part of right view is understanding the Four Noble Truths at a relative and supramundane level. So at a relative level, understanding the Four Noble Truths is conceptual. What we're doing is we're using the concepts we have learned in our study of Buddhism to figure out the path we're going to follow in order to end our suffering ultimately and never have to be reborn again and forever exist or not exist, however one looks at it, in nirvana. Nirvana is beyond birth and death, and nirvana is beyond suffering. And that's the ultimate goal for every Buddhist, whether they are Mahayana or Theravada or Vajrayana. But some of the other schools of Buddhism decide to postpone their nirvana to be of service to all the sentient beings that are suffering. So we have that aspect as well. Okay, so let me briefly remind everybody about the Four Noble Truths and the conceptual way of understanding them. Okay, number one, the first noble truth is that life is ultimately unsatisfactory. Not always unsatisfactory, but ultimately unsatisfactory. And because of that, we are sure to suffer if we're a human being because we expect things to be better than they are. We expect people oftentimes to be better than they seem to be. And we look at our own life as being full of joy and happiness and success until it's not. And it's like that car care commercial where they they say to you, remember, every car eventually will break down. You need our service. You need our insurance. And so it's, the Buddhist would say, just keep in mind that every life will end up filled with suffering because, second noble truth, because we have aversion and attachment, because we cling to things we really want to last forever, and we try to push away all the stuff we dislike and make us feel uncomfortable. And yet we can't do it because we're simply one of the many factors that suffering or happiness or success is arising. We're one of the contributing factors. So we have little to do with how our life unfolds, because for every situation and for every mindset we find ourselves in, there are 10,000 factors contributing to that. We're one. So we're at Disneyland. It's just a wonderful day. We're having so much fun. And then they say, in 10 minutes, it will close. So we have to factor in this unhappiness as being connected to the impermanence of our life, that our life is not an event. Our life is a process, and it continues to change moment to moment. And when we like the change, we feel happy and satisfied and content. And when we don't like the change, we feel victimized and we suffer and we feel uncomfortable. And we can hardly wait to change it back into feeling good again. And sometimes it takes a really long time, and sometimes it's almost instant. But the thing is, it's always a process and never an event. We're always in a constant state of becoming something else. So the second truth is why we suffer, and that is because of desire and craving and clinging and aversion. The third truth that we're going to intellectually understand is that the Buddha said, I have understood, I have completed the path. I can tell you for sure that there is an option. There is a way out of your suffering. And I discovered that through following and following it, but finding it again, a step, because there were Buddhas before our Buddha. So it had been lost to the world, and our Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, rediscovered the Eightfold Path and the end to suffering. And what he is telling us is, I can tell you what I did to end my suffering and achieve nirvana, but I can't do it for you. I can tell you how to do it. I can tell you what I did, and then you have to do it. So the responsibility falls upon us to understand conceptually and to live the Eightfold Path and to ultimately achieve the final goal of nirvana. So the first truth is, life is ultimately, not always, ultimately unsatisfactory. And the reason for it is because we have craving and desire and a thirst that can't be quenched, and we have attachment and we have aversion. And the answer to all that suffering is nirvana. So we now need the prescription. We now need the path. We now need to figure out how to get to nirvana. And that is the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And those 8 path factors work together. They're intertwined, and they will lead us to nirvana. Now, it's a little misleading to say they're going to lead us to nirvana, because, as some schools of Buddhism say, we're already there. But we're asleep. We're asleep at the wheel, and we need to wake up to the fact that we're already there. So we don't need to go anyplace. What we need to do is go inside and stop being distracted by the outside. And inside lies the goal of nirvana. So when we achieve nirvana, and I don't know anybody who has, but when we achieve nirvana, it seems to me that nothing happens in the body. It's all a transformation of consciousness, because that's where the suffering occurs. The suffering occurs in the way we experience the world around us. So this is a radical transformation, a radical transformation. Okay, so those are the two mundane factors of right view. Number one, good and bad, skillful and unskillful, karma, rebirth. Those all work together to make us a more skillful person in the world. Number two, the conceptualization, the understanding, the intellectual understanding of the Four Noble Truths, breaking it down, being able to see how each of the truths interact with each other, and eventually come to the path, which is the Eightfold Path. Okay, now we come to the supramundane part. And this is interesting because this is beyond conceptualization. So I can remember when I was 14 years old, living in Phoenix, Arizona, and my mother, bless her heart, for my birthday, bought me a 5-horsepower Honda motorcycle. And I was just in awe of this wonderful machine. I thought to myself, this is finally the freedom I've been looking for. I can go anywhere I want to, as long as I have enough gasoline and enough time. But the problem with looking at the motorcycle is I didn't know how to ride it. So I went to the dealership, and in the back, they had a little track. And that's where I began my learning of motorcycles and skillful ridership. Okay, so I on one side was the clutch, and on one side was the brake, and then we have the gear shift, and we have this, and we have that. And I had to consciously think all the time in the beginning what I was doing. Am I going to use the foot brake or the hand brake? If I'm going to change gears, I need to pull in the clutch, push the gear level, and let the clutch out easily. So I was very conscious. It was a completely conceptual way of riding the motorcycle. But then the days and weeks passed, and I was able to pull in the clutch without even thinking about it. That I had done it enough times that it was an automatic response to wanting to go faster. Pull in the clutch, push the gear level, you get to go faster. And then if I needed to brake, I would pull in the brake on the hand and also the foot brake, and I would come to the stop sign. And it just seems second nature to me. I finally was able to integrate it into my life in a very special way without having to think about it. Okay, that's what the Eightfold Path at a supramundane level is we integrate the Eightfold Path. We don't have to think about right view or right intention or right speech. We've done it enough times that is our automatic response to the situations we find ourselves in. That is the way we live in the world. That is the way we decipher the present moment experience of our life. And how long is that going to take? How long do you have to read the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths in order to memorize it? And then turning that memorization into action. How long does it take to go from concept to activity to living in the world? And is it linear? Do we always turn out to be a better person because we're practicing the Eightfold Path or understand the Four Noble Truths? And unfortunately, because we are a human being, our life seems to be linear, but it's not. It's a present moment experience. So some days are good and some days aren't so good. And we shouldn't get disappointed. We shouldn't feel victimized by the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths. We should see it as simply a practice. It's what we do. And we get up and we practice, and we try to practice with equanimity and feel that whatever occurs, there's a place in us that can accept it and get beyond it and go to the next part, because, as I said before, the next part is part of the flow. It's the flow and the river, and it's our life, and it's the stream, and it's always in process, and it never turns out to be an event. So there's really no place to get stuck in the reality of our life. We're always going to go to the next place. Unfortunately, the downside of the flow is that there's never any place to stand. We can't say, this is where I'm going to stop now, and I'm not going to go any further because I feel good with what's going on now. We can't ever take our staff and hit the ground and say, this is my space now, and I'm very happy to be here. It's always going to change, always going to change. We always have to go forward. We can never go backward. And that can be intimidating to some people, because we can never relax or rest until we finally achieve the goal of nirvana. And in the process of achieving nirvana, we are becoming a better person, and the people around us are also using us perhaps as an example of what a good person is like, if we can follow the Four Noble Truths, do the Eightfold Path, take the 5 precepts: not to kill, not to steal, no sexual misconduct, not to lie, not to consume intoxicants. We can be an example, a human example, not a perfect example, because humans are never perfect. Salvador Dali says, if you don't worry about being perfect, because you never will be. So we don't have to worry about perfection. Nirvana is the perfection, not us. And we can find our place in the world, reduce our suffering, and reduce the suffering that the world experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. We no longer have to participate in creating the suffering. We now can create less suffering. We now can create a place of peace and joy and clarity and wisdom, just by understanding right view and practicing the Four Noble Truths and making the Eightfold Path our life. Beyond concept, supramundane, beyond the concept, but to actually live it moment to moment, every day. Okay, I think that does it. I think I've said enough.
Very good.
Jeannie.
Well, that made me think a lot about this when you were speaking, that aren't any of these Eightfold Paths just born into us? Are we as humans just born without any knowledge of right speech, right conduct, that we have to have these things drilled into us because as human beings we'll be selfish and ungenerous and killing people and stealing? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, and because there's some people that will never hear the Eightfold Path.
Right.
And what's going to happen? And it's kind of, well, I just thought about this when you were talking about the Eightfold Path and how we have to learn it, and like driving, and
We have to learn it and then do it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So it is our way of living in the world. It's the Buddhist way of living in the world. We don't expect the Christians to know the Eightfold Path, or the Muslims, or the Jews, or the Hindus. So the Hindus may have heard it, but it's the Buddhist way of living in the world. And we start our life because of our past karma. So some people are a little more angelic than others. Some people are more demon than others. And I've heard parents say that they might have a son and a daughter, and they can't believe how different they are. So we each have our own karma we're sort of working out. And I don't think we're necessarily born with a skillful mind state. You see kids playing and they can be cruel, and they can be good, and they can be happy, and they can be sad. They have all that stuff going on. But we need to be able to live in a very complicated, full world with other human beings. So what's the first thing our parents do? The first thing they do is they socialize us by potty training, because they don't want us just to go out and go any place we want to. We have to wait for the appropriate time to go to the bathroom. And that's oftentimes when there is a bathroom. So we're potty trained so we can start to integrate into society. And then they teach us about breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay. And the reason they teach us about that is because we need to eat at certain times. And that when we're in school, we have a lunch break. And so we all get to eat at the same time. And you don't have to feed everybody individually anytime they're hungry. You teach them how to hold on to their hunger until the appropriate time to have lunch. Okay, and hold on to their bodily functions until the appropriate time to relieve themselves. So then we get into the idea of being good and being bad. And that's more suffering or less suffering, and that's being kind or unkind. And I remember when I did sports in grade school and high school, that sometimes just the will to succeed and be the best gets you into a place where you're sort of unkind and pushing others aside because you're the most important person in that football game or basketball game, and it's all about you and you're going to do this and that. So we're all along the way, we're taught all this stuff, and then we come to a point in our life where we start to look at it and say, is this really necessary anymore? Can I live in a more controlled way without having to abide by just the social norms? Because the social norms are oftentimes just minimum requirements to live together with 4 or 5 million people. Minimum requirements, and Buddhism is teaching us beyond the minimum. Buddhism is teaching us how to live in a much more skillful and compassionate and kind way that goes beyond the stuff we learned from our parents or the school or the job we had or driving on the freeways. It's beyond all of that stuff. So when I see the Eightfold Path, when I see the 5 precepts, when I see the 4 Noble Truths, for me, it's a reminder of how far I've come from being a kid, a teenager, a young adult, a middle-aged adult, and how I look at the world and perceive it in a much more skillful way than I did even 10 years ago, and how I really need to practice patience and kindness in all the situations, because everybody is at a different level depending on what they're practicing and what they're doing, how they understand the world. And so, standing in line at Vaughn's supermarket, man, I don't think there are 2 people the same in that line. But it's my job as a Buddhist to find a way to accept them exactly how they are, and not try to make them better and not curse them for being worse, but simply understanding that everybody is at a different place in their life and meeting all the challenges of their life as best they can. And some succeed and some don't do very well. But that changes because everything's impermanent, and maybe they'll be better in the future, or maybe they'll be worse. I don't know. But in that one moment at Vaughn's supermarket, that's what I'm dealing with. That's my present moment experience. And Buddhism has allowed me to a greater sense of acceptance with the way things are. Is that helpful, Jeannie?
Yeah, it makes me feel a little better. I still have a lot of questions though, but I'm going to let other people ask and then I'll ask after they finish.
Okay, Jeannie, sounds good. Anybody else have anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Reverend Kusla. Thank you very much. That was great. I loved your definition of nirvana, transformation of consciousness. That was just like, wow, really, really like that. And the super mundane, I just can't get enough of just, going back and I don't know if this is correct, but going back to the basics and just really, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question, Reverend Bhikshu. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I really enjoyed your talk, like Vincent. I'm impressed by your learning, and you have a lot of perspective. I didn't realize, and I was kind of moved by Jeannie's question. I was raised as a Catholic, and we're taught that there's a soul, and it's not that complicated. I mean, there's powerful emotions like going to confession and things like that, and we're going to go to hell if we're not good. But there's an idea that we had an innate goodness, and that's what I thought of when Jeannie was asking her question. And I thought that's a little bit like Buddha nature, and the idea of some teachers define sentient beings as feeling pain and always wanting to get away from pain and find comfort and happiness. And I kind of connected that to Jeannie's question. And I thought one of the things I loved about Catholicism, which took me years to realize, is it's great for working people because they don't have a lot of time to study all this stuff. It kind of gets us to that point of desperation, and then we have to awaken faith, and then we learn how to practice, kind of like you learn to ride your motorcycle, and hit or miss, and then we kind of get the hang of it. So I thought, I think that when we study, I'm kind of answering Jeannie's question for myself, is that when we study, we shouldn't burden ourselves with too much study. The study is to get us going in practice. So I think that's where a good group and a good friends and a good teacher help us to get perspective. We're not all going to be Einsteins, and it doesn't mean we're not lovable, and it doesn't mean we're not as smart as Einstein, but I believe everyone has uniqueness. So, but I just wondered, how do you feel about Buddha nature, and in terms of Jeannie's question and what I was saying and what I'm wondering, Buddha nature and what you were saying, the Four Noble Truths, there seems to be a connection. I like the idea of Buddha potential rather than some permanent soul. I think that's the danger when people start to think there's a little part of us that's unchangeable, because that's kind of a difficult conundrum.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. How I consider, or what I consider Buddha nature to be, is our potential to achieve nirvana. So Buddha nature is potential. It's not an entity. The soul is oftentimes looked as an entity. And the question I had when I first found out that maybe we don't have a soul is, where do people think the soul resides? And is it behind the pituitary gland, or is it next to the heart, or et cetera, et cetera? So the Buddha was very clear about this. He said there's nothing that stands apart and unchanging. Everything is part of the process. And for me, what that gives me is a sense of freedom. I'm not restricted in any way, that if everything is changing, maybe I can direct the change in a positive way and reach the potential Buddha nature to achieve nirvana. Then the question comes, well, does everything have Buddha nature? And I am one who says no, that Buddha nature happens when you become a human being. I don't think cats have Buddha nature. And we have quite a few here that I care for every day, and I haven't noticed any potential for nirvana in them. But I was told that if a cat sees a Buddha image, Or if a cat hears a Dharma talk, I've got Thomas the cat sitting next to me right here, that plants a seed. And then in their next lifetime, they'll be reborn as a human being and acquire that Buddha nature that we've been talking about. But not only will they acquire that Buddha nature, there's a good possibility they'll become a resident at IBMC and pay rent, which would be the perfect outcome. So, no, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Enlightened and a customer.
There we go. There we go. Selvin, how about you? Do you have anything you'd like to say? You got back from retreat. You were at a Goenka retreat, enjoying the meditation.
Yes, I was there enjoying it. That, I think you talked about meditation, not necessarily an enjoyable experience sometimes, but it was good. No, I actually, interestingly, about what Jeannie's question was about why do we have to learn this over and over? I think it ties up with what you said earlier, that we are socialized, that is educated in a certain way, that we have to uneducate ourselves those ways. So that's why it may take longer to learn something that may be very simplistic, because there's a lot of unlearning. Other than that, it's just a comment. Thank you so much again for this talk.
No, thank you, Selvin. That's a very good point. And it reminds me of Ram Dass, because Ram Dass would say the first half of our life, we're becoming somebody, and the second half of our life, we're becoming nobody. So we're unlearning a lot of this stuff in the second half of our life in order to transcend and become better, because all the stuff we've learned limits us. And people may not think that's the case, but if you're a Republican, you're limited. If you're a Democrat, you're limited. If you're an independent, you're limited. If you're male, you're limited. If you're female, you're limited. If you have a Honda, you're limited. If you have a Toyota, you're limited. We have all these limitations that define us and make us feel comfortable. And sometimes to step out of that characterization of who we are and what we've learned and what we've become can be really scary, because we don't know what's next or how we're going to react to it, and hopefully how we're going to respond to it. So we oftentimes go back to the prison of who we are because it's the most comfortable place to be. And it's rare that people take the key and open the prison door and leave that stuff behind to become their potential. Having already realized something, they've lost that potential. But now, if they're nothing, everything is a possibility. So that's a good point. Thank you, Selvin. Welcome to downtown LA and the sirens, man. Okay, Shraddha. Oh, yes. Michelle?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi, this is my first time here. Maria Elena invited me.
Oh, wonderful.
I loved your talk. Thank you so much. Thank you. I was hoping you could talk more about innate Buddha nature and innate goodness. And it seems we've already kind of talked about it, but just in a different way of that it's more of a matter of uncovering, the social messages and so forth. So I don't know, I'll just throw that out there to whatever,
Okay.
comes up for you with that.
Okay. So what comes up for me is that I'm not sure there is an innate goodness. For me, I think we're born in the middle. We have a wonderful sense of equanimity and are neither drawn to the good nor the bad, but we're drawn to the middle. And so the middle path for me has a lot of meaning. I know sometimes people have said that human beings, are born good and become bad, but I don't know. I think we're just sort of neutral. We're just like, a blank board and needs to be written on. And that gives us all the potential in the world, because the cat, is born a cat. and their instincts and their habit patterns, you know, very cat-like all the time. But I don't know if the humans are born in that way. I think we're born with just a wonderful helicopter. I think we're born with just a wonderful sense of we can be anything. We can be anything. We have that kind of potential. We can be the best or the worst, you know. We can be the richest or the poorest. We can be all sorts of stuff. And if you're looking at it from a dualistic perspective, the good and the bad, we have an equal chance of going either way. And during our life, I think we are motivated or pushed or encouraged to go in certain directions that benefit us and benefit society. And so, you know, it's hard to break free from that, you know, negative and positive, you know. If we've taken a wrong turn, it's hard to get straight. If we become really, you know, rich and miserly, it's hard to let that go as well. But the more we can go back to the middle and have that sense of balance and equanimity and that perspective of acceptance, we suffer so much less, because even success creates suffering, because all we want to do is hold on to it once we've got it. And being poor and a failure, we just want to get rid of it as fast as we can, because we know that success will make us feel so much better. So either way we go, left or right, good or bad, there's always suffering. So I think we start in the middle, and we learn and are taught and eventually become who we are. And then the irony of all of that is we got to let it go. We got to let that go if we want to keep going and progress and realize our full potential, you know? Yes, Michelle.
So I come from the Shambhala tradition, and in that tradition, it's sometimes hard to decipher what's particular to Shambhala and what is Buddhism. And then I guess Buddhism is not Buddhism. There's different ways of looking at it. So I was, you know, what I established, my ideas of Buddhism is that we are born basically good.
Okay.
So is this a matter of opinion, or what did the Buddhists say about it?
It's always a matter of opinion when it comes to me, my opinion. And what did the Buddha say about it? Yeah. Well, the Buddha may have said something differently in the Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana traditions. I know the Shambhala tradition is unique among Buddhism, as is the Soka Gakkai tradition is unique. But they're called Buddhists, you know, and they have certain things that are the same and they have certain things that are different. But if you learned in your tradition that there's an innate goodness, I would go with that. That's a wonderful idea. Yeah. And all this stuff we're thinking and talking about are just ideas, you know, just concepts, and always opinions. I've never heard a Dharma teacher have anything else to say but his or her opinions. Okay. You know, and I love opinions, because opinions are the way you perceive the world at that moment with all your experience and learning. That's your opinion today. And tomorrow, who knows? Yeah. We get to have another opinion. You know, we never stop. So go with innate goodness, enjoy it, and don't be intimidated if not everybody feels the same way, because they're all in different places.
Thank you. I like that. Thanks for your talk. It was excellent.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Shraddha, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just was thinking what a skillful Dharma teacher you are.
With many opinions. With many opinions, you know. Yeah.
With good opinions. That's my judgment.
I like my opinions.
Yes.
You know? Thank you. Hideki, how are you?
Hi. Yeah. myself, like others, really appreciate your stuff, your work, what you have to say, but I have something that's been bothering me. I consider myself a pretty good Buddhist, but I have a very strong opinion that I would like to assassinate Putin. I know that sounds kind of weird, but if he doesn't go down, the whole world will. What do I need to do?
Well, I think you have to understand that that is a very human reaction to a problem. And it not necessarily you being a bad person, but it's you trying to find the quickest way to solve the problem. And that would usually to kill something. So we have a cockroach in the kitchen. What's the best way to get rid of it? We kill it. We could catch it. We could take it outside. We could, do many things, but if we want to get rid of it quickly, we kill it. So that's one of the human foibles I think we have. That's one of the things that we're talking about, innate goodness. That seems to get into the way of our innate goodness. So what I would do, Hideki, if I were you, is I would practice loving kindness meditation every day, even for Putin. If you can get past hating your worst enemy, you'll be a better person for it. That's all I'm going to say. Is that okay? Did you hear what I had to say?
I heard you.
Loving kindness, loving kindness. Thanks, Hideki.
Thank you, Reverend Kusala. It's almost 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Thanks for everybody. Again, we're going to chant page 4 and page 10. So thanks again for everybody. And we're going to chant page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma grades are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. Mengi kupangono poka okane nyadang sajinne sunne jadang sadandam. Mengi di kungodo poka ojane nyada yutne sunne Ringi kukong poka Unyari nyadat Kutung suni yadun Om Mani Padme Thank you again for everybody. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, by the power of all the Bodhisattvas, may all beings be well and happy. Thank you again. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.